Welcome to the third VD podcast. The viewing figures have gone through the roof. Calah Singleton is in the house.
Hey yo, what's up, Brian?
It's lovely to have you here, Calah. What are you reading first?
I am going to be reading from my YA novel in progress, The Silence Read Above.
Amazing. Take it away.
Conventional wisdom is always that when the revolution comes, those at the top will pay mightily. It will only be fitting. They have gained the most from the status quo, have lived smoothly while everything else grows rough. Those at the top will finally pay the debt they have so comfortably accrued. Of course, that's not how it will happen. Some of the powerful will be punished, blood will be shed, people left behind. But as a whole, we will not have to pay. There has always been ample discussion of means and ends, about whether the means will ever justify the ends. The truth is, call it whatever you want and judge it however you wish. The fact remains that we made the rules and our rules shaped the world. So of course most of us will be okay. We made plans, and even those plans had contingency plans. Conventional wisdom is always wishful thinking and nothing more. You should have known that we would make it such that whomever has the means will be all right in the end. My name comes from my father's island, which means that no one can pronounce it. Marama. It supposedly means something, or maybe many things, all of them good, none of which matter to people here. My father comes from a place that is either as old as the world itself, or a new world altogether, depending on who is telling you the story of places and to how they measure time. It's funny the way we tell stories. Some are meant to make sense of the world, and some are meant to hide the world from view, convince us that what we see before our very own eyes is not, in fact, really there. Some stories can be told in the exact same way by very different people, and in the telling there will be two stories. Neither of those stories will change the world, though. Neither of them will really matter. My name comes from a place where nothing comes from anymore. It has been cut free from the world, and things are no longer allowed to come or go. I came from there too, in a way, but I've never seen it, and I don't think I ever will. I've never met anyone from there, not even my father. They didn't know about me when he left. Maybe I was the last thing that will ever come from that place.
Oh, amazing, powerful stuff. Very pertinent, kind of post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of post-apocalyptic vibes for some reason. I don't know. Has something happened?
How has lockdown been for you then?
It's been rough. I mean, I've been fairly safe. I've been comfortable. I'm counting my blessings. Very lucky. But yeah, it's been sort of traumatic in a way that I don't think I'll understand for a while.
Until you come out from underneath the stone kind of thing.
Yeah, it's been like, I have like slight agoraphobia where I'm just like, if I go outside, will I die? Still, even though the case count is like way low here. So yeah.
No, I know what you mean. How far ago did you write? I mean, you started writing this about like 7 years ago, right?
Yeah, I've been like picking it up and putting it down for a while, like 7 years, which is depressing when you think about it. But also like it's sort of just a constant work that I always like go back to and like add a little bit, take a little bit away, like just trying to find a piece to read for this. I was just going through like draft after draft of just like all these documents that I have in my Scrivener that just like. So much random stuff just put all together, but hopefully I'll make something coherent of it someday.
So what draws you to kind of like post-apocalyptic type narratives? I mean, you know, I teach kind of the Gothic to my A-level students, and I kind of make this argument about Dracula and why Dracula comes back like every 10 years or so. And there's recently, like even I think last year there was a remake.
It was incredible. Did you watch it?
I haven't watched it.
Oh man, you got it. It's so good.
But yeah, part of the kind of argument I make is that Stoker's tapped into kind of a suppressed fears, like things that are, universal and are kind of going to, no matter what era you live in. Dracula, even though he's a kind of Victorian,
super Victorian,
yeah, that kind of thing. But like, it's the fear of the other, the fear of the immigrant, the fear of STDs, the fear of women's sexuality becoming too free. Like those things are always going to be kind of relevant. I mean. Does the post-apocalyptic thing kind of tap into similar kind of? Is it about kind of? Are we living in a kind of era now where we're kind of constantly kind of are scared of kind of the world coming to an end, that we kind of need to explore those feelings in a kind of fictional realm? Is that what it's? For
sure. I think there's so much uncertainty, but the certainty is sort of that we're going in the wrong direction, and I think that's why it's sort of like an evergreen theme. Like just everything just sort of comes back to where are we going. I'm really obsessed with like a lot of projects that look at how we deal with the sort of emotional and mental aspects of grieving for the earth as we lose it. Like it's a process of seeing what's going to happen and being like, how do we deal with it in the present? So I sort of think of a lot of the stuff I write as like pre-apocalyptic, because I mean, this is more like apocalyptic, but I think that like I feel like I'm living in a pre-apocalyptic time because I can see what's happening, and it's just I feel very powerless. And I think that it is sort of an evergreen topic, especially in YA, because there's so much opportunity for growth in this sort of destroyed landscape. So this is also why I've been sort of keeping it for sitting on this novel, because when I first went out there, I had a lot of agents tell me like, we really like it, but we think that the YA dystopia thing is sort of overplayed with like the Hunger Games and all of that stuff. So like Divergent. So I think it's always going to come back though. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, things are not getting any better, are they?
No, I don't. I would say they're getting worse. Maybe I don't know. It's how I feel.
It's interesting in that story there you just read about. Everybody. Of course, people's means determine kind of their outcomes in these kind of disaster scenarios.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been fucking thrown to clearly, starkly thrown into, relief in the kind of lockdown and COVID-19 type thing.
And people are so shameless about it too. Like I feel like there's so many like newspaper pieces which is like my luxury lockdown, like, and it's also like boohoo poor me, but like also you had like 4 nannies that you fired because they took the tube because they had to like survive. Like I have no sympathy for these people. And it's also, I guess it's also hard because you have to recognize your own privilege comparatively. Like there was a really good New York Times piece that came out a few days ago about how temperature in like just regular temperatures around the world have gotten to the point where most people can't live comfortably, and it's just going to get worse. So like even so, like people who don't have electricity or can't have fans or whatever. So it's all relative, isn't it? But yeah.
How far do you think, I mean, race and the kind of, I know, you're like, God, please don't ask me questions about Black Lives Matters because I'm the first black person to be on verbal discharge. I'm not a spokesman for all of my race. No, but I mean, this whole thing... Little do you know,
I was elected spokesperson.
Well, if you want to talk about Irish people about something, I'll gladly, in return, I will be the token spokesperson. No, but I mean, like... more generally, how far, just talking about the means kind of thing, how far do you think kind of the fact that like the COVID-19 and the impact it's had on BAME, right? And the statistics, the kind of the no bullshit, can't spin it, these people are dying.
Yeah.
How far did it kind of build into the Black Lives Matters protests when the guy was kind of choked to death in the States?
Floyd,
was it kind of like a vent, do you think? I mean, I'm not saying you have the definitive answer to this, but
yeah.
Are the two linked, do you think?
Oh, I mean, well, okay, so yeah, they're linked because the underlying link is racism. It's systemic and institutional racism in the health system, in education and housing, all of these things that lead to higher COVID deaths. And then also in policing, which is why they would just heartlessly and callously and inhumanely just choke a man out to death for so many minutes. Like that's, so yeah, I think they're all really linked. I do think that I know that black people would have been out in the street protesting, but I think the fact that all these white people were out there, like joining Black Lives Matter and like being out there and like having their voices heard has a lot to do with the fact that people were in lockdown and just really wanted to, like the whole world was watching it, watching the George Floyd video and just really reacting to it. So I think a lot of it was just having a captive audience that was forced to see this. Yeah. And then a lot of it was like they had nothing else to do. Like 26 million now people are unemployed in the States. Like they had to have their voices heard. And I think people are really waking up to the fact that black people and people of color aren't making this up. Like shit's racist.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's kind of like, it's interesting when things kind of come to a fore, like particular kind of, I don't know, currents all hit at the same time.
Yeah. And that's like sort of what I mean by pre-apocalyptic. Like I was watching a Stephen Colbert interview with W. Kamau Bell, and he was like, it just sort of feels like we're in at the time before in a movie, like a a disaster movie when it's like a year before that disaster movie, when people are just like, yeah, it seems like really weird that like
making podcasts, and doing stupid shit, like write novels. No, you need to be saving the world, Mr. Kelly. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, Brian. Like, what are you doing? You should be like.
Lots of things wrong with me. We both know.
I know. It's like also paralyzing though. It's like I feel like I have like just so much choice of like how I could like do things to make the world a better place, and I end up doing none of them because there's just too much choice. It's yeah.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing though. How far do you think the genre of kind of dystopia? I mean, I know what you've written there is not really dystopian. It's kind of post-apocalyptic, which is a slightly different kind of thing. But sometimes I feel like I make this kind of point as well when I'm talking about Dracula, is that actually these things can kind of be a vent. Like a safe vent, a kind of almost like a kind of culturally acceptable vent. Go read a book about it and kind of have your moment of catharsis, but don't actually fucking do anything about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Dracula, for example, like, you know, Fear of the Foreigner. It's a deeply racist,
for sure,
sexist, horrible book. You know.
It's very of its time.
Yeah,
but also timeless.
Yeah,
like Dracula. Yeah.
But I mean, maybe in an inverse way, what I'm trying to say is like, you know, how far is the post-apocalyptic genre kind of just a vent for like, you know, and you know, it is YA sometimes. So is it a little bit like sitting in your room listening to Morrissey, thinking, you know, women don't love me, and you know, oh God, the weather's grey, and is it a little bit kind of self-indulgent?
Yeah,
like in the kind of.
I definitely think it's like there's some self-indulgence about being like sitting in your comfortable bubble and having the privilege to write a book about the end times, which you're clearly not involved in if you're able to write a book at the time. But I don't know. I also think at the same time, especially apocalyptic novels in the YA genre are so. I think they are actually meaningful. I didn't really read a lot of post-apocalyptic YA when I was growing up. But I think like looking at how people, especially like Gen Z or whatever, have been reacting to like all the stuff that's happening, like the fascists in Portland, like everything that's happening in the States, the Black Lives Matter protest. I think that all of those young people who are just really taking it to the streets and believe in something, I think they've actually taken a lot from like the Hunger Games, where they're like, oh, it's like this person standing up against authority. I think there are a lot of really important messages about what people can do at the end of the world. Which I think a lot of them have taken to heart. So I think it does serve a purpose, but it does feel self-indulgent at the same time. It's not mutually exclusive.
I like that. Just because it's one thing doesn't mean it can't be something else. I mean, I'm a sucker for that kind of thinking, which is really destructive, isn't it? And not actually very helpful.
Yeah.
Just because it happens to be indulgent doesn't mean it can't be also be good. You're right. I'll check myself and my privilege.
It's a yes and.
So you're going to read some Octavia Butler first?
I am. If I can find where... Okay. This is not the passage I sent you.
No one ever does what I fucking say on this podcast.
Yeah, it's fine. On this podcast and all other times.
And all other times. That is also true.
So this is from Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, who is just the like grandmother of American speculative fiction and just an incredible inspiration to me. Okay. One of the astronauts on the latest Mars mission has been killed. Something went wrong with her protective suit, and the rest of her team couldn't get her back to the shelter in time to save her. People here in the neighborhood are saying she had no business going to Mars anyway. All that money wasted on another crazy space trip when so many people here on Earth can't afford water, food, or shelter. The cost of water has gone up again, and I heard on the news today that more water peddlers are being killed. Peddlers sell water to squatters and the street poor, and to people who've managed to hold onto their homes but not to pay their utility bills. Peddlers are being found with their throats cut and their money and their hand trucks stolen. Dad says water now costs several times as much as gasoline. But except for arsonists and the rich, most people have given up buying gasoline. No one I know uses a gas-powered car, truck, or cycle. Vehicles like that are rusting in driveways and being cannibalized for metal and plastic. It's a lot harder to give up water. Fashion helps. You're supposed to be dirty now. If you're clean, you make a target of yourself. People think you're showing off, trying to be better than they are. Among the younger kids, being clean is a great way to start a fight. Corey won't let us stay dirty here in the neighborhood, but we all have filthy clothes to wear outside the walls. Even inside, my brothers throw dirt on themselves as soon as they get away from the house. It's better than getting beaten up all the time. And then, there's the next part. I'll skip ahead. The dead astronaut is going to be brought back to Earth. She wanted to be buried on Mars. She said that when she realized she was dying. She said Mars was the one thing she had wanted all her life, and now she would be part of it forever. But the Secretary of Astronautics says no. He says her body might be a contaminant. Idiot. Can he believe that any microorganism living in or on her body could have a prayer of surviving and going native in that cold, thin, lethal ghost of an atmosphere? Maybe he can. Secretaries of Astronautics don't have to know much about science. They have to know about politics. So basically this is, I don't know how much you know about Octavia Butler, but these books, the parable books, are so prescient. This is just, so I'm not in love with Octavia Butler's, I know this is like sacrilegious, but with her actual writing style, but I really do like her ideas and the way she sort of like cuts to the heart of things, really. And just this character who's present, Lauren, she's just so straightforward, so hopeful, but also so pragmatic that I appreciate that in her. And I love how Octavia is able to write about race without making it, without turning white people off, I guess. Because I'm here for it, but I also know that she won the Hugo and the Nebula. She's just a total titan. So, yeah.
What do you think? It's kind of struck me the way I think in some of your writing as well. There's kind of this kind of space, going to space. You're into Mars and kind of and I know you were talking about how post-apocalyptic stuff can kind of give you an outlet, but I think when you add the sci-fi element, it's also giving you an alternative to the reality you're in, not just the end of the reality you're in, but also some kind of do you get what I'm trying to say here? It's that by being speculative, it also becomes slightly political because what you're positing, what you're kind of giving to the reader is kind of an alternative. Here's where our society's going, and the kind of the nth degree. Here's the end game, and here's how perhaps the kind of attitudes that we could have that could get us out of it or something.
Well, I think that the way I look at speculative fiction is it is the logical conclusion or a likely conclusion of where we're headed at the moment. So Parable of the Talents, which is the sequel to this, is all about sort of a populist president coming to power and just super extremist state forces, which is really grim. But she wrote this in the 80s, so she saw that coming. That was not the reality, and I think that's one of the amazing things, because speculative fiction is you're writing things that you don't want to come true, whereas sci-fi is sometimes you want those things to come true. It's exciting technological possibilities, fantasies, things that you wish were true, and speculative fiction's I hope this isn't prescient, because it's often very dark and dystopian, but it's not necessarily dystopian. It's just
The Handmaid's Tale, man. It's kind of
But and Margaret Atwood wrote that decades ago, and now it's just,
it's holy shit, Trump could actually create a kind of weird
oh my god,
Baptist.
He wants
I don't
to.
mean ragging on kind of particular religions, but very kind of far right kind of Christian kind of thing.
And I think that there's so many Trump supporters who would watch The Handmaid's Tale unironically, and
damn right,
and be this is exactly what we want.
That's what sex is for.
In Trump's America, we're gonna do that. I make America great again. I'm pretty sure that people would look at that and not understand that it's
off the wall and
and not understand that it's a horror situation, a dystopia. They would just see it as and I think that is why America is so fragmented right now, because we are completely. It is fragmented. You can't. There's no consensus on anything, and I don't know. I think that that's sort of. Handmaid's Tale is one. I think it's an interesting way of thinking about it because Gilead and the society they have there, then you like sort of look at Octavia Butler and the parable of the sower is all about walking through like being homeless on the road and walking from place to place and getting attacked by marauding gangs and having to shoot people when you've never shot people before and just all this death and destruction. And it's sort of like the outside of Gilead, like what was happening in the wildlands. Yeah, I just love the possibilities in speculative fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, another thing that kind of strikes me about like things that were written in like the 80s or whatever, I think maybe a lot of people when they read Handmaid's Tale or Margaret Atwood or, you know, Octavia Butler would kind of, when they read anything that's kind of slightly liberal, feminist kind of takes on things, may apply this to kind of, oh yeah, this is kind of about the horrible way, you know, Afghanis or Iraqis treat women. You know, this kind of like that we're kind of a finished deal in terms of kind of feminism, you know what I mean? But I feel like that has kind of, I wonder if how you read it as, you know, a young person in the 80s or 90s is completely different to how you read it in the noughties or whatever we call it now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like, you know, year 2000 or whatever, I think, you know, a lot of people, you know, would never believe you could have kind of, you know, an American president talking about grabbing people by the pussy or kind of that like Prince Andrew thing would even. Do you know what I mean? Though?
Yeah, like we don't talk about that.
That felt like that was kind of like past tense.
That would have been crazy. Like, yeah, I think that there's so much. I think people revisit. I would love to talk to someone who like read The Handmaid's Tale or Octavia Butler like back when they came out and then sort of like reassess them now. And I'm sure there are tons of like articles online that I've just missed, but just actually hearing how people like viewed it then and then are now revisiting it and being like, maybe they were onto something and maybe it's too late. I think a lot of what in this book, in the parable of the sower, people are dealing with is like, is it too late? What is going to help? Is anything going to help? Have we already crossed this threshold? And I think that maybe people reading these books now are like, oh my God, have we? And that's sort of been the prevailing feeling of like the past few months for me. It's like, have we hit this point where there's no return? Like the Arctic was like, what, 100 degrees in June? Like, yeah.
So do you feel this kind of fiction is kind of like prophet screaming on the mountain, or is it kind of...
It's Cassandra's. I think it's a Cassandra thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like she like people who keep saying things and like are not believed, and she's like she can see the future, but no one ever believes her. That's her curse. I feel like that's exactly what these people are. Like these writers, especially women, like female writers who, especially Black female writers who write speculative fiction. So Octavia Butler's like the top of that. They saw exactly where things were heading, and they were not believed.
Sorry to cut across.
No
it just struck me when you said, you know, particularly female Black writers. I mean, do you think that position kind of allows you to see kind of the mechanisms in which kind of these things play more clearly, because you're othered and you're outside and you can see kind of how these clubs are kind of populated and mechanisms that kind of keep you outside them? And does that enable you, do you think, then to be able to kind of more clearly, I guess it's that kind of thing, is when you're in the box, it's hard to see the dimensions of the box, whereas if you're outside the box, you can see it, you know, you kind of can clearly kind of describe how it's constructed, or
yeah, you know. Yeah. And I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Like if you think about it as like looking, I like the box metaphor. So if you like look inside a box and it's like a transparent box, you can try to say what you see inside of it. But if it's an opaque box, you can sort of see what the box is doing, moving around, and you can see it's like shaking, and you're like, well, something bad is happening in that box. I might not be in the box, but I know that like shit's going down in that box. And I think that's where I think speculative fiction is both of those things. You have to like, it's like as a Black female writer looking at what's happening, you sort of imagine the horrible possibilities of what's happening in the box. And just also describing what you see the box doing. I think that there is something about being like othered and like an outsider in white Western countries, soon to be majority minority USA. But yeah, I think that a lot of it comes from like getting the short end of the stick a lot of the time and really seeing where things are going. Like there's this saying that like when America like sneezes, Black America catches a cold. Like it's always a little bit worse, and you can see that now, like with COVID, with unemployment, with the eviction crisis. Like Black America is getting a lot harder. People of color are getting a lot harder. It's like, yeah, it's a problem, and it creates sort of an impetus to write about society in a way that is seeing like radical Black Afrofuturist futures, or just describing the end of the world from a point of view that you deem appropriate. Cool.
What are you going to read for us next?
I am going to read another project that I've been working on for a long time. It's Poet Forager. And it is going to be, I don't know, it's going to be part of it. So we'll just see.
Take it away.
Gracias. I pass a sign for cyclists on diversion, and someone has scrawled in it, so what was once a traffic direction now reads, "Humans dismount and follow your heart." And I think it's poetic, and also I noticed that it should be hearts, but I don't have a marker or spray paint, and I'm drunk, so I'm not even aware if I'm right. But I think I am right, and I think I didn't get the point at all. I sleep in a park that night. It might be the same park I slept in last night. At the very least, there are lampposts, and I don't see any rats. I go north to Camden Town. I wake up to an aggressive sun that says it's early afternoon. I walk until I find a train station that is not the same this train station I came from, and take the orange train northbound until I am bored. When I get off, I ask inside a newsagent's if there's anything interesting nearby. He is an older Indian man with a frown for a mouth but kind eyes. He directs me up the road. To Camden Town, he says. Here it is like St. Mark's Place but bigger, people who have septum piercings and tattoos they already regret. The girls wear Doc Martens and plaid, and the boys wear all black, everything with manufactured holes. There is an open-air market selling trashy t-shirts and junk people don't need. There are stores that sell outdated iPhone cases that you can browse with your eyes while you get tattooed. A brown man tries to sell me salvia from one of those stores, but I buy a piece instead and walk through the crowds until I find 3 Ethiopian teenagers who sell me a dime bag. There is a canal that runs through Camden Town, a dark slice of water framed by bar patios and willow trees. I sit underneath a bridge and smoke a bowl and a half. No one stops me because I swear this is just St. Mark's Place. A pair of swans pass under the bridge. Swans mate for life. I find this kind of beautiful. I do not remember their name in Spanish, but I am sure it is quiet. Up above, there's an international food market in a place that looks like it used to be stables. The designers suggest this with strategically placed metal statues of enormous horses with terrifying raised hooves. I find the first place that takes card, Chinese food, and order chicken. Lo mein or rice? Lo mein. They give me rice instead, and not a lot of chicken. When I ask for more chicken, they pretend they don't speak English until I walk away. I'm too tired to fight them on this. I go to an off-license and buy more whiskey. I eat the lo mein all the way back. I eat the rice all the way down back to the canal and sleep until dark. No one bothers me enough for it to matter. When I wake up, I drink all of the whiskey. The bouncer at the pub called Something Arms won't let me in because I'm too drunk. I take enormous offense at this. I'm drunk, but I'm not too drunk. I tell him this, and he thinks I'm trying to be funny, even though I tell him I'm not. I've seen about 1 million bars in Camden Town, but now it's a matter of principle, and I sneak in through the door in the alleyway. The bar is mourning something in tones of wine red and Baroque wallpaper and flickering candles. Everyone wears black and sadness like a cloak, but bow their heads to death metal. I climb steep stairs to the second-level bar, where there is a patio bar and people smoking. I order a double whiskey and Coke and sit outside and trace the moon across the sky. I order another, but only drink half of it before I have to throw up. The bathroom is in the basement, and I barely make it to the sink. They're gonna kick you out. A white girl in short shorts and black fishnets and what looks like a bra watches me in the mirror from 3 sinks over. The walls of the bathroom are covered in scrawled graffiti and lipstick kisses. Rest in power, Amy. Amy, you are my light XX. Who's Amy? The girl looks at me like I'm a freak, and maybe I am, and crosses behind me to leave the bathroom. Amy is Amy Winehouse. I see that now from some of the writing. She gets all this love after all the shit she did in life. I guess that's fucking privilege. For the rest of the night, I pretend my name is Amy, which is to say I call myself Amy in my head and talk to no one. I leave at last call and head back down the canal to find some place to sleep outside again. Money isn't the problem. I just don't want to deal with finding a hostel and having to talk to people and potentially share a room. I walk for a while and find a hill with a willow tree and put my bag down underneath it before going back to the bank to smoke a cigarette. I listen to the sound of laughter coming from the houseboats parked at intervals as far as I can see. It's not too late, and it's the weekend now, and I see figures flitting behind the curtains of the boats. 3 boats down, people are sitting on the roof, and I smell weed. Amanda is probably what they call a chav, walks towards me with a pit bull and a chain. He stops when he's almost next to me, and even in the dim light, I see that his face has been destroyed by heroin. Used to be mermaids here. A smile that is full of rot and bad intentions. We ate 'em all, you know. Fish and chips. That's not true. How much love? Go fuck yourself. He cackles and keeps on walking his horrible dog down the walkway. It is a lie, and I know this, but I smoke another cigarette and watch the space between the boats for silky bodies slipping through black waters.
Love it. Camden is my town, you know.
Oh man, is it? I can see that.
When I first moved to London 15 years ago, last year, 15 years ago, I moved to East Finchley, and we used to. I was in a band. You heard of it, right?
Were you in a band, Brian? I've never heard this mentioned ever.
None of my stories start with one time when I was in the band, living in a van. Never do I bring that up. I was a singer. No, I never do that. Yeah, when I moved, we used to go to Camden all the time, and it's where we played and everything. So it's so evocative of the kind of canals. But you write about the canals quite a bit. That's not the only bit of canal kind of based writing I've heard. And so what draws you towards these places in London? Because they're very unique, kind of. They're a little bit.
They're so London. They're like, I mean, that's one of the things that really struck me when I first moved to London. You don't have that kind of canal system in most American cities. Some of them you definitely do, but I never lived in them. I mean, and you have Gowanus in New York, and it's just full of trash and dead bodies, and you do not want to go there. Yeah. But in London, canals are like a very specific thing, and they're so widespread and just like the open space. I do like sort of like liminal space that it serves as like a place that is not exactly wilderness and not exactly like city. It's like an urban paradise, and I live near the canals, and it's just clutch. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, because you live in Tottenham, right? So you're right beside the marshes. You've got like the river, and you've got the canal, and you've got the marshes right there.
Yeah.
I mean, were you drawn to that as a kind of liminal space? Was that kind of? Did you make a conscious choice to live in that particular part of London, or?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like we like overlook the River Lee. So like that's, as soon as we saw the place, we were like, we need this view every morning, and our bedroom just opens out into the river, and it's just gorgeous every morning. And you have like the seagulls, and you have all the swans, and it's just, I mean, you have all these ducks. Like one of the first things I did in lockdown was I started painting every bird I saw from my window. So every species of bird, I just did a little painting of it, and it was just.
I didn't know you painted.
Yeah, I dabble. Yeah, but
nice choice of verb.
Yeah, I don't. It's actually it's a thing that I really appreciated starting, just because I was just in like this deep funk of like just being locked down, because we were locked down a lot sooner than most people because Jack was exposed. So I was just painting birds, and I really just started watching everything go by my window in a different way, and it was a different view. And I mean the skies. There's something called like the Cloud Appreciation Society in Tottenham, and the sky is really just massive. It reminds me of American skies.
The Sky Appreciation
Cloud
Society
Appreciation.
of Tottenham.
It's so good. It's so good.
I have to check that out. That sounds great.
Yeah.
So do you think painting gives you a particular way of looking at things? And it's like, is it kind of? Why do you think painting suddenly kind of flourished in something you wanted to do when you're locked down? Is it a kind of a way of getting out of where you are, or?
Yeah, I don't. It's a good question. I've always painted, so I've been painting since I was a child, and I did painting in college for a while. So I do like it, but it is weird because I struggle with doing like scenes and I think that's the same thing with my fiction. Like for a large part of my fiction, it's mostly just like really focused observations. And I think that's what I really am also doing in my painting. I just focus on one thing, and then the background and sort of the milieu of it is a less developed. And so I'm aware of that in both areas. But I think painting is really something that I've picked up now because it is very therapeutic. Just focusing, dabbing, the feeling of having just like enough paint on your paintbrush is just like, it's amazing.
And I'm always interested in kind of the interplay between different types of arts. Kind of when we did the kind of the podcast with Rob, we were talking about the interplay between music and whether his practice of music, what that brings to his writing. Which and he was kind of saying that he feels like he brings the democratization of music, that kind of like I mean that's definitely just from rock and pop music kind of thing, but that kind of that it's the opposite of what we'd consider to be kind of the attitudes of literature, which can be quite slightly stuffy and a little bit exclusive. What do you think? Like, what do you get from painting? Like, do you think do you learn anything from doing one that gives you the other? You're saying like a focus thing of an observation of one thing. Do you ever find yourself kind of seeing, what you're writing in terms of kind of paint, if that is not too I'm not stretching it too far.
No, absolutely. Like I think, I don't know if everyone does this, but like one of the things I do as soon as I like start having a setting in my mind is like I paint it. And that is like, that really helps me.
To what extent? Are we talking like you sketch it, like in your mind, are you kind of sketching who's going to be there and what the lighting will be like? In your mind, are you imagining that shit before you go in there? I mean, going in there like writing wise.
Yeah, so I think once I have an idea in my head of like what it sort of feels like to be in that like room or that location, then I like have that, I try to write it down, and usually that doesn't work. And then most of the time when I try to like paint it, it doesn't work perfectly, but it's like a little bit closer. And then I sort of work back and forth until I get to a place where I feel happy with what I'm writing about this place that I've painted, and then painting it so it's more like what I imagine in my head, which is time consuming and like probably why I'm so slow about writing things. But it's just an interesting experience. It's just, it's very like cannibalistic or like, yeah.
Cannibalistic?
Yeah, I feel like all my ideas eat everything. Like, I guess all my interests are eating each other at some way. I don't know.
Another thing.
Also, I eat humans. That's what I'm saying. That's what I meant.
Lockdown's been tough.
Yeah.
Octavia couldn't deliver for 2 weeks. So sorry.
Yeah. Jack's dead.
Jack's leg had to go. It was good on the barbecue. Tasty leg, at least.
It's delicious.
He's a tasty looking guy. I mean.
Yeah. I mean.
I need a toe, maybe.
Yeah.
But another thing that struck me is canals. Is actually, they're kind of post-apocalyptic in themselves because they represent the end of an era. They represent the end of an industrial era, and then they fell into kind of misuse for a long time, and they were right at the end of being completely irrelevant and just the Parliament, the English Parliament, tried to get rid of them actually.
No way.
Yeah, and it was only kind of a bunch of volunteers who took it upon themselves. Because there was a right-of-way law still on these canals, so they would get on the canal and sail up it. Sail up's the wrong word. They would barge up it. I don't know what the fuck. They went on a boat up the fucking thing, right? But because they had a right-of-way, they could demand that these locks be opened, and they could go to these bridges, and if the bridge wasn't working, they could be like, I have a right-of-way and this needs to be fixed. And through this kind of process, they managed to get a lot of these things restored. And through a volunteer process as well of raising money, they actually restored a lot of these canals when they were falling into
disrepair.
Yeah. And then they got Heritage England involved.
Wow.
Anyway, my point is, I've just given you a big riff there about the canals.
I did not know that. It is very interesting. I do love local history.
Yeah, but they were totally industrial, horrible places to be, and nobody wanted to be anywhere near them because the people who worked on them were kind of like gypsy level in terms of kind of status.
Okay, Ireland.
A lot of Irish people building, holes in the ground, and like, no one, there'd be families living on a barge, and they were all sleeping in the same room basically, and there was kind of rumors of incest. It was not like
What?
So it really was like looked down upon, but I think it's quite interesting that it's kind of like that completely fell apart because all of that coal and all that shit went elsewhere. But then later it became in a post-apocalyptic thing, it became kind of like a little utopia because it's it's now totally linked with like a wildlife, like you're talking about the birds, you're talking about kayaking, and liminal space, people living on boats that are kind of, if you're living in little Venice and you're living in this little boat, it's quite bohemian in a very West London setting.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting that like the canals, like it's both the dystopia that you're kind of interested in, but it's also this kind of like speculative. Because it's like post-apocalyptic, right? It's like post-industrial.
Yeah.
Now it's become a place of kind of leisure.
Yeah, it's really crazy because I think if you go like above Tottenham Hale, it gets like very like wildernessy. There's like no buildings really at a certain point, and you just see people like chopping wood and having like little huts and like properly like they've been on the boats for decades. And if you go south towards like Hackney, you get like people like playing ukulele and just like an entire like music festival around a boat, and it's just this whole community thing. Like Jack and I, like, because we're just cliche fuckers, we've been talking about like what would happen if we joined a commune, and like watching these boat people like just have these amazing parties, and just not even parties, like kids festivals, like dogs everywhere. It's just like it is sort of like the speculative beautiful utopian fiction, like our future that we all kind of want. And then if you go north, it's just like graffiti and like wasteland and lots of like concrete and steel and warehouses, and then just wilderness. And that is another edge of like what the future could be. It's just, I don't know, so much happens at the canal, so I'm just like fascinated by it. I think it's great.
No, it is. It's kind of a slightly unregulated bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
What are you gonna read next?
Okay. Am I reading from this? I'm reading Jean Ryhes.
Some other liminal spaces.
Oh my god, so many. So, it's a Good Morning Midnight, a slight tome, but very much appreciate it. It was really just I read it in a flash, and it was just really good. I had to reread some of it because it was just, it's so rich in feeling and human observation. Okay. We get out into the street, and of course, Vlung, first brush of fresh air, and I'm so drunk I can't walk. This is a good start. Calah, he says, what's the matter? Have you been dancing too much? All you young women, he says, dance too much. Mad for pleasure, all the young people. What will happen to this after-war generation, I ask myself. What will happen? Mad for pleasure. But we'll take a taxi. We cross the road unsteadily and stand under a sickly town tree, waiting to signal a taxi. I start to giggle. He runs his hand up and down my arm. I say, do you know what's really the matter with me? I'm hungry. I've had hardly anything to eat for 3 weeks. Comment? He says, snatching his hand. What's this you're relating? C'est vrai, I said, giggling still more loudly. It's quite true. I've had nothing to eat for 3 weeks, exaggerating as usual. At this moment, a taxi draws up. Without a word, he gets into it, bangs the door, and drives off, leaving me standing there on the pavement. And did I mind? Not at all, not at all. If you think I minded, then you've never lived like that, plunged in a dream, where all the faces are masks and only the trees are alive, and you can almost see the strings that are pulling the puppets. Close up of human nature. Isn't it worth something? I expect the man thought fate was conspiring against him, what with his girl's shoes and me wanting food. But there you are. If you're determined to get people on the cheap, you shouldn't be so surprised when they pitch you their own little story of misery sometimes. In the middle of the night you wake up. You start to cry. What's happening to me? Oh, my life. Oh, my youth. There's some wine left in the bottle. You drink it. The clocks tick. Sleep. People talk about the happy life, but that's the happy life when you don't care any longer if you live or die. You only get there after a long time and many misfortunes. And do you think you are left there? Never. As soon as you've reached this heaven of indifference, you're pulled out of it. From your heaven, you have to go back to hell. When you are dead to the world often rescues you, if only to make a figure of fun out of you. I absolutely adore this book. I just think it's the unreliable nature of the protagonist, just the quick like turns of phrase and just the little snide observations. It's just such a sharp little book. Total gem. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're tapping into this kind of liminality again, these kind of turning points. I mean, why is that something that kind of chimes with you so strongly, do you think?
I think it's because I've felt in such a liminal space for such a long time. I think I moved around a lot. Like my entire life I've moved around a lot. And so I think I've always sort of felt never really settled, and therefore just like in between spaces and never really knowing what my place is in the world. And it's only very recently I've like been here and like settled down properly and sort of established myself and sort of gotten into the swing of things and really moving along. But for the longest time I just felt like I was floating, and that's I guess why I'm so attracted to I guess all three of the books I chose are all about women who are just floating in between places and not really established in any real way, which is interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah.
Salman Rushdie talks about, kind of why he writes about India, even though he kind of hasn't lived in India for a long time. He makes this point about kind of like writing his home. This kind of idea that like, because his home is gone. And I understand that a little bit as an immigrant myself. I mean, it's only across the water, but London feels like a very different place to, like, suburbs of Dublin.
Yeah, I feel like you're an expat because you're white, but like immigrant, sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's talk about that then. So that's just okay, so if I'm white and middle class, then I'm just
you're an expat, yeah.
Yeah. Am I even an expat if I'm Irish though? I don't think British people don't even view me. I think they view me as kind of they're Scottish people who got a little bit ahead of themselves. You know what I mean?
No,
they're basically the same as us.
I think
we had a little bit of a disagreement in 1916, but since then, they're basically the same as us.
I feel like being an Irish person in London makes you definitely an expat. Get it? Because it's a pat. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to.
Ex-paddy.
Yeah.
They've taken my passport away. They've gone over and take the Queen's pound.
Oh my god. Yeah. I've had. Yeah. I don't know. The whole situation with Ireland is so whack to me. All of it is so whack. Like I have no like deeply political or profound statements to make about Ireland. It's just the whole thing's whack.
The whole thing is whack. Yeah. All of it.
Yeah.
The whole concept of the place.
Yeah. Just
I
what
think
is
most
it?
Irish people would agree with you. It's a mad old place. Yeah. Basket case.
Yeah.
Surrounded by a sea. No, but the point I was trying to make is, do you feel that being not living where you are, you're driven to kind of write or try to kind of imagine versions of a home or kind of searches for home? Or,
yeah.
You know what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I really wish I could write about America and like in the same way that like Rushdie writes about India. Like, but I do end up writing a lot about like where I am in the UK, either in like autofiction or like nonfiction, or just fiction. A lot of it is about the UK now. I'm even writing like a fantasy novella that is like based in England, and it's just a lot of these places. It's very hard to write about England because I haven't seen a lot of it, or the UK in general. I haven't seen a lot of it, so a lot of it is about London. But right now, especially, it's very hard to write about London because you don't remember what London is. You're just like, I think it exists. But yeah, I don't know. Do you feel? I mean, you write about New York.
I have.
Yeah.
I feel like my fiction is very, very non-realistic, so I get a bit more of a kind of pass in terms of kind of what I write about. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, when I wrote about New York for Murph, it feels like I'm writing about an idea of New York. It's like the Chelsea Hotel, and it's kind of like CBGBs and kind of a particular kind of thing that I do know about, like music and kind of punk and kind of, you know, like late 70s kind of, you know, that kind of thing. So I feel like that is mine because I've been saturated by that so much my entire life that I feel like, and I think like New York is an idea rather than a place in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's the thing about these big capitals, and it's probably what enables you to write about London as well. It's kind of like, who the fuck owns London? And how can you say to somebody that they can't write about London, they can't write about New York, in the same way that maybe I wouldn't be comfortable about writing about some small town in Mississippi because I'd have no cues. I'd get it wrong. But like London is such a kind of patchwork of things.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard to get the big cities
concept.
wrong. Yeah, because it is just about, I mean, you said who owns like London. It's like the answer is clearly Russians. But, but yeah, it is hard to get that idea of the big city wrong. Whereas like a smaller town, you have fewer people. It could be more homogenous, and you could get it wrong. So yeah, I don't know. I do feel like a lot of my writing is trying to create an idea, like a coherent or cohesive idea of what living and making a life in new cities is like.
Sure. Also, what I find quite interesting about is that, and I was thinking about this earlier before I was kind of asking these questions. I was thinking about some of these things, and I was thinking about kind of, you know, the tradition of the American abroad. I mean, there is a tradition of the American abroad writing about Europe. You know, we've got Hemingway, we've got Fitzgerald in Paris, and we've got, you know, that is a kind of, so although you're homeless, you know, although you're kind of drifting and you're in a liminal space, in terms of genre, you're actually slap bang in American tradition, like in terms of being in a big European city and kind of writing about change.
Yeah. And like periods of transition. I feel like this is definitely like going to be a period of great change. And I do feel like I am standing on the shoulders of giants, American giants.
Pissing on them.
Goddamn American heroes just pissing on their heads. But I do sort of feel a connection to it. And a lot of, I mean, one day when I get tons of money from a prestigious institution.
Cha-ching, send me a check.
I'm
Thank
gonna,
you, Brian,
yeah.
I didn't even offer you a drink. You brought the wine.
I know, right? Also, like more of that, please. But I feel like I want to write about like the idea of being a black expat in Europe, because you have like James Baldwin as like a prime example of doing that. He's amazing, and he like felt like he could finally get into himself and find himself when he left the U.S. and the idea of what he was in the U.S. And so I'm trying to explore that in a way, obviously not as eloquently as Baldwin, but
James Baldwin is stunningly brilliant.
Yeah,
isn't he?
Just like honestly, breathtakingly brilliant. It's
Notes for a novel. Have you read that? It's kind of one of his speculative essays where he's kind of talking about trying to write a novel about what it's like to be a young black man in America, and he's talking about all of the issues you would have for trying to find the vocabulary or the kind of the tropes for how you would communicate it.
Yeah,
it's amazing, and it's brilliant because it kind of talks you through all of the kind of the issues, the stumbling blocks all the way through.
He's so good, and he manages to be like profound and beautiful, and all of his words are just like the right words. Like he's
and I mean simplistic in the most complimentary form. He
cuts through the shit.
Yeah, he cuts through the shit. Like the truth just kind of chimes out of his words. Yeah. There's no kind of like, I don't know. There's no padding. I guess was on. Not even padding. I don't think is the right word. Doesn't it?
I don't know. I know what you mean.
Clarity. There's a clarity.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah. Yeah, clarity is a good word. I think it's, I think about him a lot. It's one of those
and
people.
He's a gay man as well.
Yeah, being a black gay man in America during that time just blows my mind. And the choices he had to make were very difficult, I'm sure. And I just love how he's getting his due again, like a renaissance of James Baldwin. He deserves it. He's amazing.
Have you watched The Wire at all? The program The Wire?
Wow, interesting transition, Brian.
Yeah.
I have not. I've seen the first series, as you say here.
I think it's quite interesting because even though it's grimy and kind of detective fiction kind of stuff, there are some like quite edgy things about it. Like there's like, you know, it's in it's in Baltimore. It's, you know, it's really like grim. But then there's these depictions of kind of like homosexual African Americans, which are they exist. You know, they do. No, I know they exist. yeah, I know. But you can imagine the meeting in the script writing sessions, right? Hang on, she's going to do what now? This is meant to be a fucking detective show. You know what I mean? You can imagine people being like, you know, let's make it not, you know, it's going to be real, but not too real. Yeah,
I feel like I have one of my best friend works in TV, and she writes for like a black TV show, but just like the sort of interactions that still exist in writers' rooms around like homosexuality and what the depiction is and what is realistic. It's kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of growth to be done in a lot of areas in American culture. Let's just say that.
I've talked a lot about this kind of realism shtick with Kay, because obviously Kay, I mean, a lot of people would say doesn't write very, and I mean this in terms of the genre, and I'm not saying Kay's kind of vision of reality is not real, but, you know, in terms of the genre of what people consider to be real, a lot of people would say this is highly kind of fictional and kind of like, you know, the gods and the kind of magic and all this kind of stuff. But we came to this kind of, where we came to with the discussion was that actually, you know, often by exploring things in these kind of extracted, you know, when we move them into other worlds, we can explore emotions and ideas that are sometimes more real than what people are willing to depict and what's meant to be realism.
I definitely think that, yeah. I just think that fiction, and specifically like fantasy or magical realism, allows a lot of things that are under the surface to be made real. Like I don't know if you saw this, but like the creator of The Matrix, like the producer was
talking about, I welcome this being a trans metaphor. Yeah.
Well, they are, or she's now, both she and her sister are now, they're trans women. Yeah. And they've transitioned, and I think it's fantastic that they're now able to go out and be like, yeah, this whole time it's been trans metaphor, like welcome to like what we wanted it to be, like,
and all these tasty dudes who are writing on Reddit, I'm like, oh my god, I was into a trans film.
Just like,
I took the red pill.
But it's so amazing.
Pill? I don't know which one.
It's so many pills, I don't even know. But it's so amazing that like the world is like finally caught up with their vision, and that is like so beautiful to see that happening. Like it's always been a trans metaphor for her. Yeah. But now it's like we're allowed to see it as it is, and that is sort of like, I don't know. There's so much possibility in fiction, and
that's the power of the kind of thing, isn't it? This kind of like, and I often feel like we have to protect that space from being policed in terms of what can be said and what can't be said. And
oh man, kind of like, are you gonna get into cancel culture, Brian? Come on now.
Well, I don't really want to go there. You know,
did you sign the Harper's letter?
Okay, well, where do you stand on? Let's go there then.
Oh, absolutely not. No, I'm not touching that with a stick. Now, I mean, I think that the people who are complaining the most about cancel culture are the ones with the most privilege and are actually like, just, they're not being canceled. They still have their platform. They still have this people paying attention to them saying things, that is not censorship. They're allowed to say.
They're not really being canceled.
No, they're allowed to say whatever they want, but people don't have to listen to them, and they're allowed to talk back. And that's what they're just angry about. They're angry that people have this democratic platform now that allows them to talk back to them, like Twitter or whatever they use. Like they are able to be criticized whenever they say whack shit. And I think that's completely legitimate. I think that they're just really butthurt that they're getting called out for being wrong about some stuff, like publicly.
Fair enough. But I do, like, I've always had a soft spot for Jermaine Greer. And we're going to talk about the trans thing. I mean...
Nope.
Well, we're not going to talk about the trans thing. I mean, but, you know, she has been cancelled.
Yeah.
In terms of she's been non-platformed. And there's other people... And I don't know, I'm not saying I agree or I don't agree or whatever, but I do it does make me feel a little bit uncomfortable when it's like, oh, well, maybe, I don't know. And then again, maybe it's like, okay, this is a university and everybody has a right to feel comfortable, and you don't have a right to come here and
it's not
say
even
something that's hateful.
But okay, you can go into the I mean, this is all just rabbit holes, all of it. Just like, where do you go with this? But I think the thing with like getting deplatformed and not getting asked to speak at a university, like, that is a privilege. Yeah. It's not like they are getting their human rights or civil rights taken away necessarily. Like, they're not being restricted from saying what they have to say. They're just not being paid to say it for a lot of money at places that are public. Like, that is not censorship. That is just, you are being held accountable for your actions. These are consequences, and people don't have to hear what you have to say, and you don't have to be paid for it. So I think if they were being thrown in jail, like actual censorship looks like, or silenced in some way, like, yes, sure, talk to me about cancel culture. But until then, you're just getting a taste of just nice old consequences.
Disingenuous, though.
No, it's not.
Comment that it's not really that this is not really censorship. I mean,
no. I mean, think about it. Do you think that being on a speaker's tour all the time and getting paid like $50K for like an hour-long speech isn't a legitimate job? Like, I mean, it is a legitimate job, but
reputation is a very important part of these people.
Absolutely.
If enough kind of fire is created around somebody, then their reputation is, damaged to such an extent that they can't really, or they're kind of, I don't know.
But are they damaging their reputation? Like, are other people
damaging their reputation?
Yeah, like, is it a result of something that they've said? So it's like self-inflicted wounds, and if people are not receptive to what they have to say, then that's not the people's fault. They're not canceling someone. Someone is essentially canceling themselves by saying things. I mean, sure, you can call that censorship, but maybe it's just society has moved on, and that has always happened. That is a perennial issue, that society has moved past what you were allowed to do and the different social mores and social norms. I think that's just to be expected.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not entirely sure I agree.
I know.
But
it's a generational gap.
Ooh, shots fired. What are you reading for us next?
I am going to be reading something. You know what? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. No, it's something from. It's a sort of collection of observations. I keep this document called Running Commentary, and it started since the beginning of lockdown. So yeah, and it's also about rivers. There is a man standing on the riverbank below your balcony. He counts the balls that have been caught in the rubbish trap, the curling snake of barrier preventing them from flowing further downstream. There are so many types of balls bobbing amongst the discarded items there are so many types of balls bobbing amongst the discarded items of surplus humanity. Beach balls next to refrigerators, footballs next to Tupperware, tennis balls next to the black bulk of a bin liner that you pray is only moving with the buffeting of the current. 22, he cries to no one at all, as if the river has exceeded its pollutant quota. And then he gets onto the bicycle he's left leaning on a fence post and cycles away, leaving both you and the river to wonder. And people ask you why you think humanity is reaching its expiration date. No one asks you that, actually. Not anymore. By now they know full well what your thoughts, feelings, hunches, theories, conspiracies, as they sometimes call them, are. Lately your darkness has not been welcome. It was a decided conversational miss at least 3 successive dinner parties. You do not go to dinner parties anymore, not that you miss them and not that you want to go. You don't understand the delicate table setting, the impeccable food, the thin smiles and controlled laughter. You do not understand why people put this face on only to have it ripped off by the persistent militaristic march of Merlot. Merlot, rich, full-bodied, a bit of a fruit, as they say. A good general if there ever was one, someone in whom you feel like you are in safe hands. But you digress. You have always digressed. This entire project of your life is a digression in one way or another. You do not understand why people choose 2 faces. It seems to you such an unbearable inconvenience to have to manage. What if you forget one behind? You are always forgetting things, even things so seemingly important as your other face. You forget other people's faces frequently, and also dates and places, as well as the promises that you make to them and, more importantly, to yourself. You forget that you sometimes wish to die, and more importantly, that you decide in the end that it's not worth the bother to yourself and others, and that perhaps it is more important to not do that after all. You tire of attempting to monetize the rot, to monetize the rote, The towers above you, the routine that you work into grooves on the pavement, everything feels both structural and fake. It is not that your life is artistic, nor that it is extraordinary. It is decidedly neither. In the living and the reflecting of things, your life has become a project in and of itself, of performance art, of conceptual art, of the rotten dregs of late-stage capitalism. You are drunk on youthful promise and vainglorious extravagance. Your life becomes a project of its own, of sex and the media and politics and populism and popularity, and looking at oneself through the lens of others and of society. It becomes a question of identity and how to let things fall forgotten. It is a project of digging deep into your past, into your collective past, and conceiving that there is nothing, really, nothing to the layers you layer upon yourselves. You are the scarecrow and the crow. Everything else is corn, and you are useless here, flapping in the wind, watching your one charge burn to the ground around you. You made lists of all the places you wanted to go and all the things you wanted to see, and then you sat on the balcony and cut short your life with every breath you took. It is the way of things, it seems. You lost the lists as well. You have never been a practical person, and the impracticalities and indignities of everyday life have always been a strain on your sensibilities. You wish to die, but now you live in this place. No, it is no Paris, nor is it Berlin. The grime and glory of the true European boulevard or Strasse, the bloodstains scrubbed away with the decades, that kind of history is lost in this place. This place feels sterile. Sometimes it is empty in the oldest parts, and there are no smiles here. You cannot smoke indoors, the food is inferior, and you have to know a man who knows a man who knows a man who used to be a woman, who can tell you where to find a half-decent sex dungeon. These are the things you have forced yourself to get used to, if not accept. You never thought you would put down roots in this place, this alienation, and you were right. To you, this feels like an interlude, however important of one. This is not a place, this is a placeholder. You will take some of the people and the wisdom and hopefully some of the currency along with you when you go, as well as undoubtedly a demonic and very tiny cat, and your husband. But go you will at some point. Go you must. Even the most austere and cold rock in the middle of the ocean, a location that meant so much and aspired to more, even such a place will sink into the sea. Find higher ground, you tell yourself. A primal scream for survival that winds off into a wall. Sorry, my contacts. Find climate land, a place high and dry and safe from the marauding gangs and the refugees who will laugh at and scale the walls they build for against them. Find a place apart. You have always wanted nothing more than to find a place in the clouds where you can be left alone. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I'm asking you about how you feel about living in London, right? No, it's interesting that the imagery of like two faces and kind of.
Yeah, the duality. I'm really into like the idea of, because I'm a Gemini, so duality has always been. I mean, obviously that means nothing, but duality is always an interesting sort of idea to carry with me. Having two personalities. What's your sign, Brian?
I'm an Aries.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Don't know what that means.
People always say that.
Yeah.
I guess it's just what you say when somebody tells you what's on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, dual identities. I mean, we all have multiple identities going around. It's that liminality thing again.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it's really.
Is liminality fruitful, do you feel, or is it kind of? I mean, as a writer, right? You know, liminality, being in the middle and not being sure. Surely that's a very fruitful place to be. Whereas being sure and totally kind of comfortable is probably not where you want to be for creating. Yeah,
I definitely think, and I mean, I think people who think that they're comfortable are lying to themselves. Basically, that's mainly where I'm coming from. I do think it is a fruitful place. I don't know if I would describe. I mean, I guess lockdown is a liminal state, but like I don't know if it's been particularly fruitful for people. Have you been able to write a lot in lockdown?
I've done some. Well, at the start, I was teaching, so I was trying to get my head around how I'm gonna like deliver lessons online. My dad was way ahead of the curve. He was trying to teach this stuff online for years, and he lent me his program to kind of do the PPTs and the thing at the same time. So I got my head around that, and then I did do a bit of writing, And then I rewrote Murph, that novel.
Really? You rewrote it?
I rewrote bits, like all the bits, and then I cut out. I reread the whole thing from start to end. I definitely wouldn't have done that if I hadn't had like that, because I wouldn't have had the time. And for me, often like the writing is kind of like I need an outlet for like whatever's going on now. I need to write something to kind of vent it. So it's often I'm like pushed to write something new just from what I want from my writing. Whereas I'm less good at editing because I'm not getting that relief. I'm not getting that kind of clarity of mind. Where, you know, when I go back, that's kind of like a chore. That's hard work, and I've got plenty of hard work in my life, teaching, being a father, and you know, as joyous as those things are, they're quite tiring. And you know, when I want to escape from like labor, and I want to do it into kind of somewhere that's quite imaginative.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I find the editing process, when I was younger especially, was more laborious for me, and I find it quite hard to force myself to kind of like rewrite for the 5th time a paragraph, even though that's what needs to be fucking done to achieve the level. But I managed, I've forced myself.
That's awesome.
To do more. Maybe that's more about being older as well. I don't know, but like definitely, I think. Shots back. Shots back. I reread it and I rewrote all bits of it, and I'm kind of happy with it now. So I think that was a good thing. I did some gardening. I think having more time sometimes can be quite productive. But then again, maybe I've been quite privileged that you know I'm getting paid to be a teacher, and now I'm on holidays, and you know I have a house and stuff, so I'm quite secure. So maybe that's only because I have things that allow me to feel okay about this.
Yeah, I feel like if you
go on.
Yeah, no, I feel like you should be happy you had the space and the time to do it. You are privileged, and I mean, feel lucky. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not also privileged, but I haven't had this sort of mental space to be able to do as much work.
Well, you're a disaster, kind of. You look. You're not. I didn't.
Wow, he literally, guys. If you don't edit this out, right? He just said I was a disaster. Okay, cool. Well, fair enough.
No, but you love a little bit of disaster, kind of like.
Yeah, but
I remember talking to you once about kind of global warming, and it was all like, we're all gonna die in a inferno, and I mean that's true. But
yeah, I'm right.
Most people are able to kind of go, okay, well, I'll stop eating meat and I'll ride my bike, but you're like, I need to write a novel about people dying from the Sahara. Yeah, I mean, people are dying in the Sahara. Like, that's just the facts. I just think that every newspaper should have as the front page every day, like what smoking adverts. Well, just like the climate stuff every day. Just be like, what the fuck are we doing, guys? Like, just every day on the front page. But yeah, I don't know. I've always, it's weird because I've always like thought I would survive to the end of the world. Like, that's what my goal is. You are. Well, I mean, am I? I think it's like still a little pre-apocalyptic, but I do, like, that's always been the goal, to like make it to the end of the world and be like, okay, I've seen it. I mean, I don't think the world is literally going to explode. The globe is not going to blow up, obviously, but I do think that our existence is going to be fundamentally changed, and that is what I'm really interested in. So it's a great time to be a writer in this vein, but at the same time, it's like kind of paralyzing when you realize that everything you've been thinking of for like 10 years is like coming true all of a sudden. You're like, oh, fascism? Okay, cool. And also a global pandemic. Nice. And the Arctic is 100 degrees in June. Tick that off the list. Like, it's all the stuff all together, all at the same time. And my shower was like turned off for like 2 days, and I couldn't I'm not going to make it, guys. It was cold water. I couldn't do that shit like that. You couldn't have a cold shower. No, and it was, no. So the thing is, like, I thought I'd be able to make it in the apocalypse. I don't think I'll be able to, like, make it in the end times. No end times fun for this one. No, you're right. No, it is. Yeah, it's a shit show, isn't it? Yeah. But it's also like, it's such a ridiculous thing to say that well, at least there's some good things to write about. Well, it's such, like, to say that. Is writing basically fucking pointless, and we should be on the streets masks on, ready to kick some heads in. And
Oh, Brian, come on. That question is bullshit. Everything is pointless. Like, nothing is worth it. It's all going to be destroyed. But that is sort of liberating in its own way. I think it's like, if nothing matters, then nothing matters also. And like that, you can do whatever you want. And not in a sort of nihilistic sense. It's more of like you can have this freedom to really explore all the opportunities that life affords you. And there is a certain freedom with that. Yeah.
Oh, no, I definitely couldn't live without writing or some kind of outlet, even if it is pointless. It's a beautiful kind of pointlessness that doesn't do any harm, I don't feel.
It's the best kind of pointlessness. And art is the best kind of, like, it adds so much, but it is hard to commodify or quantify if you, unless you're like, I mean, it is, but it's a sort of nebulous, sort of intangible that you can, it adds so much, but, what is it really?
What are you going to end your appearance on the VD podcast with?
My God, I can't believe it's over. It's over. I know. Oh God.
We'll have you back.
Oh, thanks.
You're big and famous.
Bigger
and famous.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah. I'm ending with my year of rest and relaxation by Ottessa Moshfegh.
Oh, amazing.
And it is an amazing book that is pretty much made for this year. Kind of. It's where I'm like, okay. Riva just sat there, kneading her hands against her thighs. After a minute or two of silence, she looked up at me and put a finger under her nose. Something she did when she was about to start crying. It was like an Adolf Hitler impression. I pulled my sweater over my head and grit my teeth and tried not to laugh while she sputtered and whined and tried to compose herself. "I'm your best friend," she said plaintively. "You can't shut me out. That would be very self-destructive." I pulled the sweater down to take a drag of my cigarette. She batted the smoke out of her face and fake coughed. Then she turned to me. She was trying to embolden herself by making eye contact with the enemy. I could see the fear in her eyes, as though she was staring into a black hole she might fall into. "At least I'm making an effort to change and go after what I want," she said. "Besides sleeping, what do you want out of life?" I chose to ignore her sarcasm. "I wanted to be an artist, but I had no talent," I told her. "Do you really need talent?" That might have been the smartest thing Riva ever said to me. "Yes," I replied. She got up and tick-tocked across the floor in her heels and shut the door softly behind her. I took a few Xanax and ate a few animal crackers and stared at the wrinkled seat of the empty armchair. I got up and put in 10 cup and watched it half-heartedly as I dozed on the sofa. Riva called half an hour later and left a voicemail saying she'd already forgiven me for hurting her feelings, that she was worried about my health, that she loved me and wouldn't abandon me, no matter what. My jaw unclenched listening to the message, as though I'd been gritting my teeth for days. Maybe I had been. Then I pictured her sniffling through Gustatti's, picking out the food she'd eat and vomit up. Her loyalty was absurd. This was what kept us going. "You'll be fine," I told Riva when she said her mother was starting a third round of chemo. "Don't be a spaz," I said when her mother's cancer spread to her brain. I can't point to any one event that resulted in my decision to go into hibernation. Initially, I just wanted some downers to drown out my thoughts and judgments, since the constant barrage made it hard not to hate everyone and everything. I thought life would be more tolerable if my brain were slower to condemn the world around me.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Calah.
Aw, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
You promise to come back again?
I will definitely be back.
Peace. Let's go drink loads of wine.
You.